Hey, what's up? This is Del Jones from the band PunkBordello, and you are watching the PunkBordello podcast. I want to thank you for being here, and I also want to mention that the next song that we release is called "Hotter." It releases on all streaming platforms May 6th of 2025, and you can find that early before release for $5 on Bandcamp. You can listen to it about 3 times before you'll hit a paywall. But that's just fair game. If you want to see it and download it before it releases, you can give us $5 or whatever you want to support the podcast, to support us as a band. And then you can also do the same with the next release, Take the L, which normally would be like June 16th. And that one would be $10 or pay what you want whenever or whatever you want to throw our way. But we want to thank you for being here, listening to the local underground artists, the heart of our city, our country. When we sit down with this next guest, I really hope you enjoy it. Share it on your socials, help us grow. We have some really killer guests that are going to be coming up, and I'm really excited to do this podcast. So thanks everybody for watching. Keep doing that shit Chicago style, you know what I'm saying? All right. All right, welcome to the PunkBordello podcast. We have Neil Dixon Smith here. So without further ado, let's get into it. Let's get into it. So what's your background? Where are you from, man?
Right on, Del. Thanks for having me. I'm originally from Syracuse, New York, and where I grew up in the cold and the long winters, and I've slowly, of the course of my life, I've made my way to the Midwest. I originally went to school in Pennsylvania. And then I went to then I lived in most notably in Ann Arbor, Michigan, through the 90s. Started out as a graduate student, and then I really got into music, and had some success as a guitarist in some bands in the Ann Arbor music scene in the 90s in Detroit, and then we'll get into details about some of this stuff, but that kind of led me to Chicago. Actually, I came to Chicago managing a band,
Mm-hmm.
but some guys from the Flint area of Michigan called the Ghetto Billies, and I helped them get into Chicago, and we took over a storefront in Humboldt Park for a couple of years, and then a miraculous thing happened, and the hows and whys, we'll get into that. But I met an older gentleman, 60 at the time, a 68-year-old man from Chile, who had been in Chicago since the early 90s. And this is so I moved to Chicago in 99. So I met him around, 2001, 2002. And I started off just taking some, I wanted to take guitar lessons from him. And this is he had played in learning classical guitar technique and learning South American folkloric styles. And it's turned into, and I played guitar since I was a kid, and played electric guitar in all sorts of different kinds of bands in my teen years and into my 20s. And but I was transitioning to a nylon string guitar and learning some solo guitar technique. And so it started off as kind of almost like taking classical guitar lessons with him, and he put me through the paces of that. And eventually he began, I earned his trust, and I earned his respect over a couple of years. And then he started teaching me his repertoire. And over 9 years, I was in a guitar quartet that he had created. It actually started out as a sextet. And that's when his name got on the internet, Alfonso Chacon, and in 2004, 2005, even before YouTube and stuff. And when that happened, record collectors from Chile started contacting me and be like, "You know who you're playing with?" And this guy is actually kind of a living legend in terms of Chilean and South American music. And he was in the 50s and 60s, was in the greatest ensembles, in Chile, and accompanied the great singers of South America at that time. And anyways, so I became more like an apprenticeship, and I became a solo guitarist. And so for the last 20 years in Chicago, and I had a very unusual education. So what I am right now is I'm a solo guitarist. I play for all sorts of like events. I had a period of my time when I was beginning this process where I'd spent many years in the wedding market. I did tons of weddings. Sort of transitioning now to trying to do more like concert like performances, I would say. But I still work all the time doing like private events for, I played yesterday. I did Mother's Day at the Morton Arboretum, 3 brunch sittings. I did an hour and a half set, and then a 2-hour set.
Oh, nice. Well, keep him busy. Yeah, that's a
That's right
lot
on.
that's a lot to do in a day.
And I play primarily so Alfonso, he introduced me to the solo guitar traditions of South America, and especially music of, I would say, there's incredibly deep guitar traditions out of Argentina, out of Brazil, out of Peru, and Venezuela, and learning the great sort of the masters, and learning the great music and of each of those countries. So I became a very unusual, like sort of like a white dude who performs this music, and that has its own sort of like strangeness to it. But and then from him, I just sort of picked up so he passed away in 2011. And so I had this unusual thing where I had like, kind of like beginner classical guitar skills, but then this gigantic repertoire to learn. And so it's been this process of like catching up my hands to the music that I was taught to play. And then I begin to like understand how it works and understand the rhythmic, the sort of, it's very fascinating how, there's all through the Americas, there's this, the music traditions are all, it's like a mix of the African, of European, and the indigenous populations. And in South America, there's much more of a prevalence of the indigenous populations, have much, because they weren't, it wasn't as genocidal, down there. And so they have much more of a stronger influence in the cultures, the unique cultures that spring up from place to place. And but there's this, the central, the polyrhythmic cells, the polyrhythms that came over from the African populations, and how to those, creates the dance music that everywhere. And so it's exciting music to play once you start learning about solo guitar music and solo guitar music from South America. It's a thrill to be doing it. And very different from like the Spanish, from like flamenco and things like that. And
absolutely, yeah. No, so we were talking before we actually started recording here, and I didn't actually know that this was going to be relevant, but it is kind of like more of a unique thing. But I used to live in Medellin, Colombia, for about a year, and I mean the whole reason why and the whole story to it is a little bit of a tale of trauma, but at the same time, I did also kind of so at the time I'd cashed in all of my guitars before we moved over there for Les Paul what was it, a 1960 reissue gold top. And so that was the guitar that I had from the age of like 12 to 17, and like 12 to 19 actually. I slung it for rent money, so I didn't fuck over my roommate at the time. And the thing is I when I was down there, what's funny is like the whole market for like quality like kind of like American made like kind of guitars, like Gibson, Fenders. It's just like very difficult to find anybody that can like have those. And it's funny because like I've met some musicians in bands that I was like touring in who would like be from South America, and they would buy gear here and then go back and like sell it for like a markup for you know what I mean.
I can imagine. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
It is your own little import export business.
Yeah.
I know that there's people I've known, like people in like the Mexican folk community in Chicago,
Mhm.
where they kind of, you literally have to get a relationship with like the people who build the instruments
Yeah.
to have them
Yeah.
brought them if
Yeah.
you want authentic instruments. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean the same kind of goes, I think, for like well, not actually. I think the reverse, like it isn't true. Like you're able to find like good flamenco and nylon. You have the the pick of the litter in the United States when it comes to that. But I did have like a flamenco like nylon string guitar when I lived down there.
Yeah.
And I just knew to hold on to my Les Paul because it was like fucking. I mean, if it's like the Cadillac of guitars here, but even there, it's like the Cadillac of guitars there is like
Yeah.
fucking creme de la creme.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So and the other thing is like I was learning Spanish at that time, um, so like I had to be very cautious of like being uh basically like a resident tourist there.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
trying to like learn the language as I went on. And now, I mean, as I've kind of developed a relationship with the Spanish language, I'm like semi fluent, like enough
Nice.
to
Yeah.
utilize it in most 9 to 5 jobs that I have to fucking work while I am stewing on making a record and building the infrastructure to tour it. So speaking of which, I mean, so you mentioned that Mother's Day performance. What else do you have coming up?
The best chance to see me, to do really what I do. I perform sometimes at the Montrose Saloon in Albany Park in the city, which is a great live music venue. It's like a neighborhood bar that has live music 7
Right.
nights a
Yeah.
week, pretty much. And yeah, the owner is a fan of solo guitar, and also is like sort of is a classical guitarist himself. And so I play there. I get to play there sometimes, like Friday happy hours. So they'll be there like Friday. I want to say the 29th of May. I'll be there. It's like 5:30 to 7:30, and I'll do a 2-hour set.
Yeah.
And I play in these situations. I love it, because I have such a long history of playing for you as background music, for
Huh.
events. So I'd be doing like 2 or 3 hours, going behind playing for parties, which
Right.
is an
Yeah.
amazing experience. And you get to like in this music, you get to, and before I got into this music, the bands that I was in Ann Arbor, where I was a rhythm guitarist in the reggae music scene, and I was in
Mhm.
bands that did like a lot of like 90s dance hall style
Mhm.
reggae music, and I was in an original music project that sort of play it was like a 4-piece band that would create sort of electronic music, and play it like and so we would do house music and dance hall rhythms
Yeah.
and Miami bass rhythms as like a rock band. But and then
Yeah.
we would treat it and we would mix it. We would have like friends who were DJs. We had we understood that, the idea of being a cog in a rhythmic machine, and
Yeah.
you have a fader on yourself, and you understand how to mix yourself in sort of a
Yeah.
dub style on stage. And I was always
Yeah.
being in a reggae band at that time. You learned that there was this whole language on stage of how the band, how these like I'm talking about like Jamaicans here, like on
Yeah.
stage, and the bass player is like the conductor, and there's like little commands that might be given that basically create mixes on the stage. Like you might say rhythm, and that means that the bass is going to cut out. You might say dubwise, it means it goes to drum and bass. Mix me down, and the band will go into
Oh no.
rhythmic patterns.
Real
Yeah.
quick, you froze real bad.
Oh
I'm
gosh.
hoping that. Yeah. Sorry.
Nonetheless, I had
Yeah.
before I got into, so a lot of people get into classical guitar from metal, but it's
Yeah.
a common
Yeah.
on ramp. But I came to it from dance music, and
Yeah.
so I took on these. And you learn and you understand that these folkloric styles are dance music in the context. They're all comfort. Usually, are music created.
Right.
The dancing was first, and then they made the music to match the dance. Kind of.
Right. Yeah.
So I have this mentality when I would play for events that I would treat this music like I was a DJ and I'm spinning it and I'm like always trying to create transitions, kind of what are going to be like the tracks that work best together. Or I do, always doing like 10 minutes of sambas and then 10 minutes of milonga, so I bring that, so that sort of like that experience and when I get to perform at a place like the Montrose Saloon, which is not, obviously there's more of a, I mean, it's sort of in between a concert and background music and that environment. But because it's the saloon, I can go sort of emotionally to places I would never do in a background music situation professionally.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's a real performance. So it's
Yeah.
so I get to play for, I'll do like, I do these long, I do like, like 10 or 15 minute sort of flows between doing like mixing 4 or 5 tracks. Sometimes I go deep in a style, or sometimes I like to like show juxtapositions between like 2 different radical styles that sound to me just sound great together,
Yeah.
And so it's a very unique solo guitar performance. And I stand and I move, and so I'll be doing that at the Montrose. That's like a public performance I'm doing. Everything else would be, I do a lot of private events, for people, even like country clubs and or there's a major, I don't want to talk about it too much, but there's a major Midwestern, very elite institution that I do like a lot of like donor dinners, with the president and
Oh wow.
things like little fundraising. It's a really cool, once you get, because it's weird. It's I do everything from I've done like because there's not that many, even in Chicago, there's not that many Venezuelan musicians that would be known by a planner to be called. So I've done like Venezuelan quinceañeras.
Oh wow. Okay.
Or cultural Peruvian cultural events, because I know like at least like enough music to sort of like play some classic pieces. And those are always amazing to do. Too, like people will hire me for like a private dinner party in their home.
Yeah.
Or I'll do. What are some of the other, the McHenry County, they hire me for stuff. I do they have like the Pearl Street Market in McHenry. I always do that, and I'll do a downtown. There's some sort of downtown event in McHenry. Like they do these things. They have like a really cool little shopping district that they created, and they have like so they do like an event, like a Chamber of Commerce kind of event where they try to get people there. And so I'll be the entertainment for things like that.
That's awesome.
But those are like fun. I love doing that, and I love to even like get in the spirit of the event. If it's going to be like a heavy like hitter, like I've gotten to like have like sort of like be like, I did an event. I've done events where like there was like Vince Gill was there, is just because his wife Amy Grant was being recognized for something, and I happened to be the sort of the dinner entertainment, and he came over and introduced himself to me. So.
That's nice.
So it's fun. So you do this. So it's a really weird, being a solo guitarist, because you get to fit in so many spaces and you can kind of go around. I do all sorts of bizarre stuff. It used to be. I mean, now I have a family and especially post COVID. So when I was like before, I was married and before I had a kid and things like that. When I could really, when I was sort of like first coming on, that you have to. There was a whole process, how do you begin even something like this? And that was the other. So I had this dual existence when in my experience in music in Ann Arbor in the 90s, where on the one hand, I was in these bands that were playing like the clubs and doing original music and sort of wild experimental, mixing sort of like noise and beats, and
if you can't tell, we're into that.
And then while the other hand, I was in this the sort of the reggae aspect of it, I was in this like a very professional sort of like reggae band that would be hired for, and we would play country clubs and business events on boats in sort of the Detroit River and or frat parties. Oh my God! And we played a frat party once in Michigan State in East Lansing, where they like brought. They brought in sand for the floor in their basement. Oh my God!
Oh, that sounds like
all sorts of crazy stuff. But nonetheless, you learn. But from that experience, I learned how to hustle. I learned like what it meant to be sort of like a working band. That how do you hustle? How do you make that, get those gigs? And So balancing sort of like an artistic fire with like the hustle aspect, the sort of entrepreneurial aspect of it. So being a solo, and I always had that quality in the bands that I was in. I was always sort of like I got a high motor, I'm always like the sort of the organizer and the whip cracker. And if not the main, usually I find people who are more talented than me and sort of,
Yeah.
But I pick up the slack of being, the mediocre dude in the band by doing all the grunt work, so I learned that.
Yeah.
So when bands ended, and I would like, that I could keep active, helping other bands get their things going. And while I was trying to figure out what I was trying to do next. And then I kind of came into solo guitar, and then solo guitar was this whole new opportunity to like apply. Not only like I have to think about this artistically, but I also have to like make a hustle out of it. And what are the spaces that I could possibly be in? And I would, go to wine stores and find out if there was going to be, when they had events at a wine store, man, I'll just come and play for free, and somebody will see me and they'll hire me for a party, or farmers markets. We used to play some of the first gigs I did were like at the Green City Market in Lincoln Park, and I had some connections into the food world a little bit, and so I got playing there, and people would see me there, and I would do all sorts of crazy dinner parties and stuff like that for like rich people in Lincoln Park and stuff. So you start off this very humble thing, and then one day I'm playing for free, and then I'm getting invited to background music at some like super rich person's house where there's like Warhols on the wall, and I'm like playing for a dinner party, so it's
wow. Well, but that was probably also very very what's the word, the music choice of the repertoire that you were playing is probably very befitting of those events.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And it's because there's
elegance.
And there's two big elements. On the one hand, there's party music, so half of my repertoire is like high energy. So I can go and play for like an hour and a half and not like drop energy at all. And it's just all I'm playing, very intense, charging, either Cuban music or cumbias or whatever it is, and then on the other hand, there's the deeply romantic ballads, and the waltzes, and that are just like make you cry, so I can maintain. So it's all this mood music, when I play weddings. So I play half hour before the wedding, I just go all the way deep into like most romantic, music.
And so do you
I love it, both sides of that coin.
You obviously, I mean, you've been doing this for quite a while, so you have like the repertoire, and I'm sure you've built it over the years as well. But like how many songs do you practice and play regularly to be able to play for like 4 hours?
Yeah, I have about, I would say in my hand. So you play by memory. You learn it. It's in your hands. It's probably, I don't know. It's somewhere about 80 or 90 pieces. Some things I have to. So it's this gigantic garden, and that's a problem in and of itself, because you have to. Plus, this is where like if you get involved with playing with weddings, and then you got to like learn something. Then somebody's not only got to maintain all this. Now I have to learn like some stupid song you want to hear.
Or do some sort of like flamenco kind of alteration of a popular. I'm sure you've gotten a Taylor Swift song at least, right?
I've done. Oh yeah, I have sang "Lover" as a first dance at a wedding. But
we just learned so I had an acoustic gig the other day, and we learned a Taylor Swift song on the spot for a $20 You know what I mean?
Nothing wrong with that.
You know what I mean? It happens.
That's music, man. That's what's
fun.
But so like that was it's typical. Being hired for 3 hours is real typical, and so it's usually I might do like a set 15 minutes of music. I might play something like 15 pieces, so it's very typical gig. I might, 3 hour gig, I might go through something like 60 pieces of music. And so it's sort of in that 80 to 90 realm is sort of like, after that, those things start to fall away. And so there's one thing to sort of like maintain all of that. And that's why it's like, it's like the shark that can never stop moving in the, or else it will die. It's like you can't stop
Right.
gigging. As soon as you stop gigging, then like, what am I supposed to do? Practice all this? Like, if I
Yeah.
keep gigging, then I can keep playing it as long as I'm playing everything, once a month or so. But
One of the things I definitely have, so I mean I made my full-time income from kind of taking whatever gig I possibly could. I mean
yeah,
I play multiple instruments, and it was always literally out of like necessity for like whatever um band that I got into, you know what I mean? Maybe I'm you know the best out of four drummers in the room, or I'm the best out of the four guitar players in the room, you know what I mean? And so
yeah,
like my station just kind of got, shifted to wherever I was needed most. And then when I was in high school, I took like more advanced level like songwriting and theory classes. And then I went to college briefly, but I couldn't get over the fact that I was relearning a bunch of stuff I had already kind of advanced beyond. So
yeah,
I ended up dropping out because I was, I haven't really been gifted with that much, to come from. So it's something I'm actually kind of grateful for. But at the same time, when I finally managed to start invoicing like a big boy, because that's a big part of
oh yeah,
music, and
yeah,
uh, it's a weird conundrum because you gotta like have you gotta put yourself, you have to do it for free in order to be able to charge for it, which is weird. That's the kind of industry that we're in, and it's specific to
yeah,
kind of whoever wants to pay you for what you do. And it's when you're an original artist, it's completely contingent on who you can bring in. If you're, doing, someone noted this to me a couple of days ago, and they said it's uh gigging and playing show like original shows are like completely different things, because original is like, original show is like I'm showcasing this that I made, and then the gig is kind of like, what I was doing the other day, which was just like playing acoustic songs for a
yeah,
bar owner, or playing weddings, and that sort of thing. It's like, it's their event and they want you to play certain things,
sure,
so they're paying you a little bit more. But they also have to know you can do it in the first place. So it's one of those things where it's like the pay is kind of the last step of the process. And even when it's a weird dichotomy. But
oh yeah,
before I stray too far away from
yeah,
my
yeah.
from
I see
my
what you're saying.
original point,
Yeah,
um when I first started, like, actually, I mean, I was playing drums and, this and that, and then I was also doing whatever, like, acoustic guitar work and whatever odd gigs I could do. Feel like, I mean, I went up to Minnesota and played in this metal band for a nice good little chunk of change to a decent show and everything like that. Um and the problem was that, like, I didn't have, it was really difficult for me to set aside money for extra expenses, because the amount that you charge is still subject to the gas to get there. You know what I mean? And
hmm
it's really difficult to, secure that amount of volume to equate to the same amount of money that,
yeah,
you would be getting, because, the workplace is changing every day.
yeah,
You know what I mean? And you have to factor in all these expenses. I mean, you're essentially just being a one man business, or,
yeah.
a
Absolutely,
three man
absolutely.
business whenever you are doing all this stuff. And that's what makes it really
Yeah,
difficult. And I think my goal, so I did what I'm doing here in Central Illinois, is I'm doing what I call taking a step back to lunge forward. You know
right
what I
on.
mean?
That's a bit.
So I wanna, I'm not, and I would kind of like, my advice to any other, like, younger musicians out there who are trying to figure it out for themselves would just be like, you have to think about it not from the standpoint of like, somebody's going to come along and gift you all of these things and it's going to just fall in your lap.
Oh yeah.
You have to go out and get it. You have to secure it, and you have to do so in a way that is sustainable,
Yeah.
in a way that is going to just so like just because you look at it as like going after a risk, because you don't know when something like COVID will come along and fucking totally wipe it out.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah.
We are in any kind of dystopian future. The arts industry, we've learned, is kind of the first thing to go, where they look at us as like kind of the most frivolous thing there is, and that's
That's what AI
actually,
will kill everybody.
yeah, exactly. And so the difficulty is in being able to secure your value as an artist, I think, and just trying to line everything up and plan it out in a way that is like methodical and sustainable. And like, I've learned that the whole "if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense" mentality is absolutely correct. And once you've invested enough, like, prowess and technical proficiency into like your guitar work,
Mhm.
or your ability to I mean, there's
Yeah.
DJs that I know that are able to do very uh virtuosic things to a song, that, and I still am like, I don't know how to work a turntable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If I'm playing the tracks, it's like all shit that I made, like kind of like as an organic kind of approached musician,
Yeah.
you know? Which is something that has kind of like fascinated me recently, and is the whole concept of, the record I'm working on.
Yeah.
Um uh, but it sounds like you have a lot of experience with that. Like, tell me more about the Ann Arbor days. Tell me more um about that, because that's when you started mentioning it, it's kind of exactly what I'm going for here. And I think like I feel like Detroit and Chicago didn't get enough love back then. Like, I mean, I if you think about like even Chicago punk and Detroit punk, like you had your those two communities kind of like coincided in some way, shape, and form together. And a lot of um like popular DJs that innovated house were also punk musicians. And so it's like it's really wild to see how those worlds collided in a world that was a lot more like separated and clicky when it came to styles of music. So like I'm really interested to hear about like what that experience was like for you, because Chicago and Detroit specifically were the unsung cities of like punk, as well as like Chicago came out, or house came from the underground of Chicago, and then it like quickly spread over to Detroit, right?
Yeah.
And or like is similar times and everything like that. So I mean, what was it like coming up in that time, and like what was that musical journey like for you?
Well, it was it was awesome. I mean, I'll take a step back and just give it some context. So I'm I don't know if I'm the oldest guest you've had on, but I'm 56. So I started playing when was first getting into guitar playing and rock music and rock and roll. It would have been like 1983, 84. And I was in a high school band. So I started playing like guitar like when I was like 13, and when I was 16, I probably had my first high school band. And we were like, this was in the mid 80s, and so it was sort of we were all like, it was like a classicist garage rock band. We played like Chuck Berry tunes and
Mhm.
Ramones tunes, and
Sweet.
it was early Who tunes and Talking Heads tunes, so early Talking Heads tunes. So it was kind of a mix of sort of like, but all, it was a rock and roll band. And we got
Yeah.
to, it was a little bit different. The times were a bit looser then. We even got to like play some bars at Syracuse University, when we were like 17 or 18. And so that was great. And then we were also doing, but definitely like bar band, kind of like rock and roll. And I was probably at that time, like into like the Replacements, pretty heavily, and
Nice.
early the first like 3 or 4 REM albums, and Husker Du, Zen Arcade was like
Yeah.
massive, and the Minutemen, Double Nickels on the Dime, all that stuff, SST, and but then what happened was, and so that would kind of when I went to college and I finished college and I went to I went right to grad school, and through it, it's a whole other weird story. But I landed in Ann Arbor, Michigan in 1990 as a graduate student. And the first thing that happened was I moved in and I moved into a house, and a guy who's in my program, and he was from Ireland. And so suddenly, like, my first group of friends in Ann Arbor were all these English and Irish graduate students. And so I was like this, like, guitar, meat and potatoes kind of like rock and roller, and like hanging out and like just like smoking tons of weed and hanging out with all these people they turned me on to drum and bass music and reggae music. And then getting involved in discovering the radio station there, WCBN, also had all these fantastic dancehall and reggae shows and world music shows, and just in general. And eventually it became involved in that radio station. That became another part of my education. But I started like caring. So this was my first year. I was 2 years in graduate school, and then in which I spent way more time as this was like the first Gulf War, and it became like an activist against the Gulf War. I spent I got more into the community of like radical students, then my second year I was like in the TA union, and we went on strike, and so I wasn't gonna have a career in academia, that was clear. And I knew I wanted to I hadn't played guitar that much, in a few years, but I wanted to get back into playing music. And so I was okay, I'm gonna try to, and I had this idea. I wanted to be in like a 3 a.m. band, I wanted to play like really, I was getting into like dub reggae music, and it was like really like mellow psychedelic music and Afrobeat and stuff like that. So I put up so I'm like 23 years old, 23, 24 years old. I put up an ad like at the local record store, and I'm thinking, like, I'll meet all the people in the mid-20s, but then like a 16-year-old kid answers my ad, and I'm like, right. Oh God, like, what am I supposed to do? Have a 3 a.m. band with a 16-year-old kid? This is weird. Yeah. But we weirdly hit it off, this guy named Billy, and me and Billy, we started. And even though we were like, I felt this is weird that I'm playing music with this, like, and he was like a townie, and his mom, and I started then as like his mom was became like one of my great friends of my life, but over time. Well, eventually these becomes the most important people in my life, and eventually, and his mom was part of like the trans love cult in Detroit, and was like was good friends with like John Sinclair and the MC5 scene, and through her I got to meet like all these like Ann Arbor, like getting back like the legends of Ann Arbor music, the Stooges and the MC5, and you start to see the connections and meet these people who are still around. This is in the 90s, so there's still that energy is still there. And so it was amazing. So me and Billy, so Billy's like grew up as sort of like a hippie kid kind of, and so it blew my mind. Like, I grew up in like white bread suburbia in Syracuse. I'm a little bit older, but through Billy, I becomes friends with all these like skate punks in Ann Arbor. And I'm like in my mid-20s, and they're all like 16, 17 years old. And I'm doing acid with them and jamming all night in basements. And and this is what's crazy. So Billy and I, we're really into reggae music. We're also listening to tons of like Sun Ra and so we put up an ad. We were like, we want to find a drummer. Yeah. So we put up an ad. So the two of us now put up an ad, and amazingly, and one of the things we say on the ad is we're interested in reggae music. And like, I get a call like a week later with this Jamaican accent. This is dude. He's like, "Hey, I see, you need a reggae drummer." And I'm like, I don't, we're like some freaks that are just looking to like jam, and we like that music. I don't know what, maybe, and come over, let's meet. And so incredibly, there's this dude named Carlton Dawes, and Carlton was he was obviously he's from Jamaica, and he grew up went to like as a teenager went to like the Alpha School in Jamaica, and his classmates was Ziggy Marley, and he was the original melody maker, toured soccer stadiums as a teenager, and he was in London. And he knew that, and he met this like beautiful rich woman from Detroit, I think. Wow. And he decided, okay, I'm gonna marry her. I don't want to do this lifestyle. I'm gonna marry her, and we're gonna go live in Detroit. And he went with her. The marriage didn't work out, so suddenly, but he has like a kid, and I think, and then he's going to become. He's like, okay, he's gonna be a musician in Detroit. And he starts playing through, and he's like a front man for like the Trinity Steel Drum Band at the time, who were like definitely the hottest band, one of the hottest live bands in the whole region. But he wanted his own group, and he was tired of like the scene, and he wanted to find some new dudes. And so he was like, "You guys like reggae music? I'll teach you how to do it. You'll be in my band." Yeah. And it took a little while, but eventually. So I mean, it was like we eventually got into Billy. So Billy played bass, and I played guitar. and so we got this like incredible education. So he would played with like Gregory Isaacs, and he had done studio work. I mean, he was an incredible drummer. He would when he would sit down on a kit and he would play the kick drum, you could like feel it in your I'd never heard another drummer do this. And but he wanted to be a front man, and he was good on the mic, and he was really charismatic. And so we had this really weird thing. So we were like in this reggae band playing all these weird bars all over Michigan, all over like, you know, Flint, Michigan and stuff like that. Right. And then playing weird corporate events in Detroit, country clubs, frat parties. And then Billy and I were like also into this other radical music, and there became this thing in Ann Arbor at the time called Scheme. And Scheme was like, it started off as like a bunch of like the local punks just like crashing at parties and just like bringing instruments and like creating mayhem. Yeah. But eventually turned into kind of more like a sort of like a sort of a noise orchestra, you know, and eventually sort of like everybody, there's like 20 or 30 of us that were sort of involved in it. And we would go on to like crash open mics at bars and stuff like that. And just,
that's fucking awesome.
We would set up, and then we would set up our own events and play for like, you know, do like, you know, we'd all like drop acid and do like a 2 or 3 hour, like insane free improvisational. And there'd be like, you know, like Ann Arbor freaks would show up and totally dig on it and stuff like that. And some of these, if people know, like, if you've ever heard of the band Wolf Eyes, sort of like some of the people that we were jamming with, they're like an incredibly prolific noise group. So what's crazy is that out of the scene, like eventually all these like little bands start forming out of this. And so there were some of us, the core of us that we were in these noise jams, but we were also like, you know, we were getting into techno music and getting into house music. We loved 90s dancehall reggae music, you know, which was really exciting at the time. And so trying to be like, let's be a band and play this music, you know. And we made this band called Butterfly that was like really like, you know, we were really hot at the time. We got brought out to New York and got put up in the Chelsea Hotel with like, this is at a time when like the most insane time of like the music industry, sort of like post Nirvana. Like there's money and like go outside, go to every college town and find the band. So you get this like, you know, really inflated egos. And I had a friend of ours who were like, I had a great friend of mine in Ann Arbor. She was like basically hired to compete with Gwen Stefani, you know, because we couldn't find like Costoni was going to spend $500,000 on this band, you know, and ended up ruining her life kind of, you know, and
my gosh,
it was terrible. It was really weird stuff that went on. But we had for 2 years, you know, like 96, 97, 98, that time, it was like super exciting and super fun. And being the scene in Ann Arbor, there was it was like a lot of camaraderie. The big band at the time, there's a band called Morsel at the time that we were all really loved, and they had sort of got some notoriety. Eventually, Andrew, he was young at the time, and I didn't really know him, but other people, Andrew WK kind of came out of that scene. He's almost an oldies artist by now, but time. And then it was so weird. What was so weird was that
you're not talking about the whatever song guy, are you?
The guy with the bloody nose, Andrew WK, party. Every song had like the word party in it for a while.
No, I
he was like big in the early aughts, you know.
Okay, no, I was thinking of something else. My fault.
But those are sort of like, you know, it wasn't like a kind of a scene where like people were coming out and getting famous and things like that. But it was really intense and it was super fun, and there was several years where we would do a float in the Ann Arbor parade every year, just like a freak float, and you know, all sorts of super fun stuff. And so I had that sort of like that energy, you know, that combination of sort of like, so, you know, at the one time we would have the reggae band at its best was we would have the experience of getting to do like 3 sets in like a place and have people dancing the entire time, and you get the experience of like what it means to be a musician and have playing dance music and have people dance to music and see what happens in the band, how the band, see as the band gets tighter, the dancing gets better, you know, you this weird sort of cosmic math of like how much, you know, you have to the sort of the ins and outs of that, of the sort of like the physics of music and dance music and having bodies move and having that be like this ecstatic event, you know, and at the same time going home and then just like, you know, having these like all night long jams in the basement and just like pushing your physical self and just but just like keeping rhythms going with your friends and pushing those experiences all the way that you can, while you can, you know, when you're young and feeling fucking great. And all the fires that were stoked inside me for those events that like came through and eventually got to like channel that through. We had to like find something to channel it, you know. And So I do that. So I found with solo guitar, like in this music, this, the Latin American solo guitar tradition music, and all those, you start to see, once you get past the sort of like the insane, just sort of like chaotic, it's like being blasted out into space, like the first time you're blasted out into space, it all just seems like chaos and wild. And then but you do it again and again and again and again, then you start to see, oh wait, there's forms here. Oh wait, if I do this, if I get in control with it, my spaceship goes farther, and if I get control of it, I start to make the things happen that I want to have happen, instead of just have my mind blown all the time, and then we start to understand like the power of style, and you start to understand the power of forms. And then you start to see these forms that repeat themselves in different, especially what's so fascinating about folkloric styles around South America is that there's all these like slim variations from here. There's like one base, there's like this rhythmic cell that's very, and then like the slightest variations, and it gets a new name, and an entire literate tradition on top of it. And then the slightly different over there, and this, completely different. It's so fascinating to learn that, and I get to play with those ideas and things like that. It's an amazing.
So what are your favorite songs in your repertoire? Because I mean, I think trying to be a musician in any capacity at any age, who is making a living off of music, I mean, you're always gonna have to have like those moneymaker songs, those ones that are kind of staples of your set, I think.
Oh,
so, what are some of your favorite pieces?
Well, from the experiences that I had, being in the reggae bands and the other band and the band Butterfly, is I love finding those places in a song, and creating where there's like a little wormhole, where there's an opportunity to create a loop, to kind of like, take something in a different direction, then to come back to it. And some people, like a jazz artist, will jam and improvise by playing notes, but when you get into dance music, you learn how to improvise by structurally, like you break you break down, you find a cell, you repeat the cell, you spin the cell around, you take it all the way, then you come back to the song. And it's all done without counting. It's all done by, so I have in some of my tunes, I have found those points, and I have created sort of like places where I go, especially when I'm playing in a real, a place where I can do a full performance. I have these thing. So there's a song that's very meaningful to me. Probably like the climax for me is my performance of a Brazilian tune called Canto de Ossanha by oh my gosh. I have a strange the name will come. It's a very famous. I can't believe I'm not forgetting his name, but Canto de Ossanha is a super classic. So getting involved in learning styles, especially learning styles of music, I always think it's a great rule to like find the canonical works, the works that you think are like, you might think that, oh, just because hundreds of people have recorded Canto de Ossanha, so you think, well, why would I want to do a song that 100 people do? Well, you do it. They've all covered it because there's like things to learn in the experience of playing this song. And some songs are like totemic, and like some of the musical ideas in it. And so it became it as well as like it has like a really soaring chorus. It's really fun to play. It's a fantastically fun song to play on solo guitar, and it afforded this place where I could sort of like improvise, and that turned into like a thing that I do within it. And I have a few other tunes like that. So that's a big. So Canto de Ossanha is a big one for me. There are some. When I'm feeling really great, I play chicha music from Peru, sort of like Peruvian cumbia, and Danza de los Mirlos, it's really like I have to feel it, because it's super bit. So it's a really wild thing to play on. It's like it's my own arrangement of it. It's like a crazy. It appeals to me as like a guitar song, it's like almost like a rock riff, but it's just this like insanely danceable track, and it's wild to play it on solo guitar. And that the history of that is already, it's like these like crazy Peruvians playing Colombian music and in the early 70s, and so it's a super classic track. And I have like a little suite of different cumbias that I play, and that's usually a lot of those tunes have some of my favorite, just like moments, and then on the slow side, there's like there's a piece of a romantic waltz from Brazil called Abismo de Rosas, by Giacomino. Giacomino, awesome name, also known by Canholto, lefty. So he was an incredible guitar composer in the early 20th century in Brazil, and wrote a lot of like famous, important music, and it sort of embodies to me sort of like a spirit of solo guitar music as sort of like, because he made like incredibly, took street music and put it on solo guitar as a, in a not an academic way, and is but this is a particularly beautiful song, and it's like one of the most, I'm going to make a new video of it pretty soon. That's an incredibly meaningful piece to me. There's I play some music by Argentine guitarist, composer, songwriter Atahualpa Yupanqui, who's a gigantic figure in Argentine folk music, and has one of his most famous songs called Los Ejes de mi Carreta, and I have a really special arrangement that my former teacher Alfonso created. Some of his arrangements of his arrangements are always just fantastic to play, that I play. There's a couple. Another piece called from Peru, La Flor de la Canela, like one of the most important cultural tunes of Peru, and I have a fantastic solo guitar that also has some it's like some dance interludes, some sort of breakdown interludes in it that I get to bear down on some amazing guitar styles, and so it's a wide variety,
So like when you're doing the solo guitar stuff live, does anybody ever come up to you and ask do you ever incorporate any kind of like tracks or anything like that, or is it just you and a nylon guitar, acoustic guitar?
It's me. I'm pretty hardcore about that. Yeah, no, I don't. I think about, because I practice the drum machines, and if I was in a situation, I do. I'm if I can get into a situation where there's, I'm sort of finishing with I had done a little run of these shows at the Montrose, and I have one at the end of May. After that, I need to find a public place for myself. So there's some places I'm exploring, and I could conceivably, if I was a place I was very comfortable with that wanted me to experiment with that, I could have fun doing that. But otherwise, I'm usually pretty hardcore about being a solo guitarist and not doing backing tracks.
Well, I definitely respect and appreciate that. I like the musicianship, because it's like I mean, in today's day and age, it's just it's like it feels like as artists we have an appreciation for like all styles and all walks of music, and it feels like the way the general consciousness has shifted is kind of dumbed down the general, you know what I mean, the general
I fight against that.
Yeah, I mean,
directly. I don't
are,
and I don't. That's one of the thing I've never. What's funny is that I hear people will like, I've never. I don't know, because I'm just very lucky, I think, with the repertoire that I have, and that people are kind of, maybe it intimidates people, but I'm hired and I do what I do, and very rarely people tell me what to do. I go, I get hired to do what I do, and I don't let people talk to me any other way. I don't. As soon as I start getting like vibes of like, oh, we expect you to do, and I could, if I had a different attitude, I would have a lot more gigs. I think that's probably true, but I don't care. I'm dedicated to like my path on it, and I get what I get, which is pretty good. Right. It's always just enough to not quit. Right. But just enough. And maybe, I was, success can be, and to some degree, I mean, I have a happy life, and it works for my family, and sometimes success can be sometimes it can be a trap, and you're fucked for a long time for a year of success, so
yeah. And I mean, it's really interesting, because I always I find, and this has kind of been like a big point of contention for where I'm at. I'm like kind of finishing up the record, and this will be music that I'm releasing for like the next 2 years of my life, right?
Yeah. Congratulations.
And yeah, thanks. But like where I've kind of come to is like there's kind of like this looming, daunting kind of reality of the state that the music industry is in. And it's like I always kind of like romanticize the past, or find myself romanticizing in eras that I didn't even live in.
Sure.
And I mean, I'm wondering if if it was, but I have this one song called Big Deal, where I mean, I kind of tackle the whole issue of like, I kind of, when it comes to, I kind of stopped doing, all the super crazy extracurriculars about the time I was like 21, 22,
Right
because I
on.
got into some like legal trouble,
Sure.
and like, it's not even really that I was like, I never really touched coke. I never did
Oh yeah.
anything like that, because I know what it could do to
Oh
me. I
yeah.
grew up with plenty
Stay
of
away from that
people,
stuff.
I
Yep.
was the youngest, and everybody
Yep.
always told me, stay away from that shit and you'll be
Stay away
fine.
from that shit. That's right.
Smoke a joint every once in a while. If that's the worst thing you ever do, you're kind of all right,
That's right.
And
Hell
the other
yes.
thing is, I also like never really preferred the feeling of being drunk. Anytime I was ever like fucking,
Yeah.
I was always a lightweight, so anytime I was like on the
Yeah.
floor, like out cold, fucking, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? I was always the first to get my fucking face drawn on.
Yeah.
So like, I'm
Yeah.
like, that's not my thing either.
Yeah.
Um,
I can't drink and play music. It's weird. I enjoy drinking, but I can't drink and play music really. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll have a drink every now and again, but I
Yeah.
noticed, like, especially as I've gotten older, and I'm approaching 30 now, so, like, my metabolism is kind of making itself known.
Hmm.
It's just, it makes me feel worse, and it's like, it's poison for your body.
That's right.
Maybe it they're
All
also
things
so
in moderation. All things in moderation. You have to find
exactly,
your
you know what I mean?
limits.
And the other thing is, like, I've kind of, I've learned the value of kind of like, atta value you're prioritizing your mental health, your physical health. I also come from a bit of a family of bodybuilders too, so that's always kind of been, one of the reasons the Misfits were my favorite band, because I
Wow. Oh
mean,
yeah.
when fucking Sid Vicious was passing, doing heroin and stuff, fucking Jerry Only is over there just fucking cooking for his mom. He's like, all right, you guys are doing that. All right, I'm out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I kind of valued that kind of attitude towards, prioritizing the music and your health, and kind of looking at the songs that you write as kind of like a something that you have a duty to kind of give a platform, in some way, shape, or form. And where I'm going with this is that I kind of romanticize an era I didn't even fucking live in. And I think that, sometimes things would be better. And then, you come to like, hear about all the stories of people like getting signed, but then their shit got shelved because they were competition with something that everybody knows now,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's like, that was just a nature of the beast. And I mean, I just don't think it. I don't think it's any better. I think it's kind of the same, if not like a worse level of kind of, because now they can just fucking shadow ban you, like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, you say one thing out of line, and like, oh, there goes your following. But the other thing is, like, it kind of
Yeah.
doesn't also translate. You kind of, if you want to see results in any way, shape, or form, whether it be, through playing, classical guitar, or playing, dance music, like,
Yeah.
you kind of have to just go out into the real world and make people show up. And now people don't have, I mean, because everybody wants to stay indoors, we're post COVID, so that has had its own impact.
Yeah.
And like, it's harder to get people out now,
Yeah.
whereas like back in the 90s, like, I mean, people used to just go out on the weekends,
Yeah.
and
Oh
that's
yeah.
another like hurdle to deal with. So
Oh yeah.
I mean, where I'm at is like, yeah, it I'm just kind of dedicated to the art, because regardless of what the industry looks like, the art comes when it comes because of where you come from, and it is kind of just your duty to get it out there. And that's kind of what the whole concept of the whole album is about, besides just being about like my story, being homeless in Chicago, just as being this fucking punk living practically outside of a rehearsal studio. You know what I mean? Fucking trying to get enough gigs to survive, kind of shit. But it's really interesting, because I see a lot of my like my outlook of music, through in your experience. And that's, I mean, that's primarily why it's like really interesting to talk to you, because I also under, understand and respect like the musicianship behind, you know, a DJ set. My brother is also a house DJ, or house DJ in Detroit. Shout
Yeah.
out to Frico's Wavy. Listen to him on SoundCloud. But you know, he's always been he's always been really good at like getting that kind of party together, and you know, doing bigger kind of things in that kind of regard. And I've always been like this introverted fucking rock musician, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Trying to find a way to put a clever spin on some shit and call it a rock band, you
Yeah.
know? And it's wild. And I think that, so another thing I want to say in this podcast, because it's relevant, or in this episode rather, is that I find this kind of attitude between beginners as well as like people who've been at it for a while, of kind of like an indifference to music theory. And it's like it's there's the one side of it that's like, you know, you have to know what you're doing enough to be able to communicate it to your bandmates, and that's one way of looking at it. And then there's also kind of like the understanding, if you master one thing, you see it in all things, right? And when it comes to music, music is like, we love it because it's a reflection of life itself. And in that, when you delve deeper into musical concepts, it kind of like is a nod. The truth in that is like a nod to a truth in life. Like for the most simple example that I can give is when I was teaching drum lessons. I used to always say tension is the enemy of progress, right? Because if you're sitting there and you're trying to get like, you know, faster single stroke rolls, or you're
Oh,
trying to get, you know,
Yeah.
that whole deal. And I mean,
Absolutely.
and speaking from my experience as like a touring drummer,
Yeah.
and
I know what you're
what
saying.
it took to,
That's
you
a hard
know,
lesson to
get
learn.
there. It's learning when to relax. And I mean, I similarly,
Sometimes
I
you don't even
mean,
know if you can go, you know, you're finding new levels of relaxation. I mean, you can tell yourself you're relaxed when,
yeah,
and
you
then
know,
and then you realize how, then you, before you're relaxed, you know,
it's
and
it's like a nod to the tighter you squeeze, the easier it'll slip out of your
yeah.
hand. You
Yes.
know what I mean? In
Yes.
a certain kind of way.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the more intense you're like thinking about it. And I mean, this even comes
Oh, yeah.
down to like when I was playing like when I was touring with a band who shall not be named because they fucked me over. But like when you know, I found you know, the superpower in kind of throwing them off and like making them laugh in some way before we went on stage, because they're so
Yeah.
attached to their nervous energy that it would derail the entire performance if I
Yeah.
just let them sit with it. So in order to make myself and all of these guys look great, you know what I mean, being the drummer, kind of controlling the energy and just looking at him and just saying some stupid shit, and like, you know, playing the character of like the, you know, fucking bonehead drummer, you know, it got them to like shake off their nerves against their will to be able to deliver a better performance. And it's like again, tension is the enemy of progress. Is the more you stress, the worse shit is gonna get. Like, I mean, me and my girlfriend had a disagreement yesterday, and we locked ourselves out of the house. I had to pay $60 for them to come and
Oh,
fucking
man.
lock the door. You know what I mean? And then like after it happened, like she's like, "Wait, you got the key?" And I'm like, because we were just going on a walk. She's like, "Wait, you got the key?" And I'm like, like,
You know, it can be
you
a
know,
necessary part of the process though too. You know, when you're
yeah,
learning, if I'm learning a new technique, you know, just still all the time. You know, I didn't go to music school, you know, and I didn't go to a conservative, you know, so I'm really like especially with technique stuff. I'm so
yeah,
self-taught, and you know, so things that maybe you know take me 5 years to figure out, I could have learned in 5 minutes maybe, but I'll start a
it's
technique,
not
and you
like
have
that.
to start. You have to, but anyways, I'm just gonna say is when you
Yeah,
start something new, you're going to be, or you haven't had enough repetitions at it,
yeah,
and there's an awkwardness and you know, and that's the shame about, you know, the sort of the receding of the music industry is
yeah,
because you need young musicians especially, but everybody needs more opportunities to do it, and there used to
yeah,
be, before the early 70s, especially, there was just a much more gigantic world of professional musicianship out there that,
Right.
somebody could plug themselves into. And now it's like especially when it comes to doing more, I mean, that's it was a wild that there was a while where there was like a market for original music in
Yeah.
places. That'll probably be more of a historical blip than some sort of like thing we should lament not last. It's amazing that it happened, but who knows what the future of it is. But nonetheless, though, when you're anytime, to work through, to get yourself to a state where you're past that stuff, it takes hammering through sometimes. And
Well, it takes diligence in any
yeah,
kind of capacity, you know
you
what I
gotta,
mean?
you have to drive to keep going. I mean, and suffer through bad performances and not,
Yeah.
no, just tell yourself, band. I mean, I remember the first times I played for like a wedding ceremony, and just like, wow, like, holy, this is like a level of nervousness that I'd never experienced. I mean, not
Right.
especially
Yeah.
as a stand of solo music. I was like, okay, I'm about to play canon and
Right.
D, and
Right.
I'm so like I'm shaking, and
Yeah.
probably wasn't that great, and
Yeah.
just gotta look, okay, suck it up, and we'll do it again, and come
Yeah.
back, and
And that's the thing is that, like, you have to kind of embrace the suck. You have to allow yourself the space to be a
yeah,
beginner,
yeah,
and kind of take it easy on yourself. And I think
absolutely,
one of the things I notice people really struggle with is that inner voice, and they're so overly critical and hard on themselves right after the jump. And I mean,
yeah,
I'm very fortunate to have had music be my safe space from an early age. Like I won't go too into vigorous detail, but my journey to music started from a place of trauma, and that I would just go to good if I needed a pick me up, if I needed to be in my own little world, I would pick up the guitar and teach it to myself. And I was self-taught, and I was actually avidly against learning theory. And this is why I make the note of it, is because, like, my growth has been in, um ironically, in all the people that didn't really know a whole lot of theory. Like my brother, who's a DJ in Detroit. He would he played the flute in marching band. And when I went to go live with my dad, and also my brother, he would say, you can be a great musician if you have no idea what you're doing. There's your Kurt Cobain, but was Kurt Cobain? I mean, you have your Kurt Cobain, you have Jimi Hendrix, who apparently didn't know anything about music theory either, but they understood the shapes to a certain extent. They understood how to string a melody together, and that's more important than anything, because then that's what makes music kind of magnetic, and that's a different set of it's a
well,
different conversation
Jimi
entirely.
Hendrix. I mean, Jimi Hendrix also played years in like the Chitlin circuit and in army bands, and
Yeah.
played a lot constantly. All the play was like,
He
he
also
might
had
not
to
have,
fill the expectation in Little Richard's band,
yeah,
you
he
know what I
might not have
mean?
been Dizzy Gillespie in terms of how or Charlie Parker and knowledge of bebop, but
Yeah.
he brought his music to a place that was sort of beyond theory, and
Yes.
there was a thing to that, I whether you theory can definitely, I mean, it definitely, it helps. It can help open doors for
Yeah.
you. It can help you think about things in new ways and bring ideas
Yeah.
to you. It can help you. I mean, I think that there's a lot more to be gained from, like, you can, it's fascinating to learn other music sometimes, and
Yeah.
sometimes you need to have some idea, and understanding some music theory makes that process so much easier, because then you'll start
Yeah.
to see the patterns and things like that. But at the same time, my old teacher Alfonso, he had a saying, kind of, and some people can very disagree with this, but he would say, and he was also somebody that was perhaps beyond theory, so this was an easy thing for him to say.
Uh-huh.
But he would say, whenever you feel like you need to learn theory, open a book, read some poetry, go for a
Yeah.
walk.
Yeah, I mean, and though I can also, like, if you the thing is like, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because there's value in knowing what the rules are so you can break them. And then there's also, like, value in kind of just letting it be. And whenever I find myself in kind of like a place of like a writer's block, or I feel like, like, kind of wall hitting me in some sort of way, shape, or form. I mean, I learned how to do everything by ear, and then I appreciated the language for it later on, so I could communicate with, the snobs and the elitists of music, as well as I could communicate with people who
Yeah,
don't know anything. Because
sure.
I mean, I think the experiences that I learn the most in is when I kind of try to figure out how I can take something more complex and put it in a format that somebody who is good and proficient at their instrument but doesn't really know the language for it whatsoever.
Yeah.
Um, but at the end of the day, the funny thing is, like, the people that I know that are having the most success with it, like, for instance, I had Mark Esses on the podcast. He plays he plays drums in a band called Night Spice, as well as like DJs a whole. I mean, he does a lot of DJing stuff. I mean, and that is kind of its own gig in and of itself for him, that he is uh, getting everybody there. He's doing it. He's making the bread. And he's not a theory guy whatsoever.
Yeah.
And he's just
Oh
like,
yeah.
fuck it, you know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
go for it, have a good fucking time, and that's like it's more befitting of the casual listener. But what I would say is that, like, in I feel like you're more in a position to meet people who would kind of critique you a little bit more. You would think, at least, being in, with your main kind of breadwinner being the classical music, and playing more formal events like that. Um, but as long as you can play string, some fucking like depending on what the ask is. I've noticed that in a lot of situations you can kind of get away with just playing like certain jazz staples. And I mean, as long as you can name out chords and kind of do that whole thing, I'm not personally paying attention to, oh, is this the 4, is this the 6, is this the 6? Like, yeah,
Sure.
I mean, I do
Sure.
pay attention to like chord names, because I'm singing, playing guitar usually.
Yeah.
But it's weird coming from like both kind of worlds, because I've just been like hyper obsessed with music since I was like fucking 6 years old. So like guitar, drums, bass, and piano, I just have kind of immersed myself in all the language. But I also realize there's value in not being such a dick about it. You know what I mean?
Well,
Like,
I think that it's important to recognize that musical talent is not one thing, and
yeah,
there's different types of talent. I'm an insanely left-brained musician. Like music to me is shapes and texture, and I have things like harmony and melody to me are like what comes last. Like that's what and other people are the opposite. They're
yeah,
all harmony and color and melody and do not understand rhythm at all and don't appreciate
yeah,
rhythm at all. Or
yeah,
don't or couldn't tell you,
right,
couldn't describe, they could describe to a 6-note chord, but
right,
aren't really aware that there is of the rhythm that's happening underneath or something like that. So
yeah,
and there's some people, and some people have literally, I mean, my experience is that some people have no, it's like from their brain to their hands is just like a tariff free easy ride, where for
yeah,
me there's like checkpoints and like negotiations.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I can't, I can't, I play jazzy music, but I'm not a jazz musician. And as soon as you get, like, if I see like a jazz musician, a jazz guitarist, I cannot talk,
yeah,
because I just presume that that their ears are hearing things that is such a level that what comes out of my mouth just must be gobbledygook, because like their level of hearing is so outrageous, and I can't believe it or understand it, and and so, but usually most almost all 95% of what is really good music is based on pretty simple ideas, and
yeah,
even things that sound, sometimes what's amazing to learn, what's refreshing to learn, and what a little bit of music theory helps you understand, is that sometimes music that sounds complex, it sounds harmonically complicated, listening to
yeah,
a bossa nova track where those chords are just like, what are these chords? this music is so complicated. And then once you sort of break it down and you realize, well, it's the dude on his guitar sliding his fingers down half steps, and then you got to put it to a piece of paper. And so to make that as a chord, it's a piece of paper. It's like it's got 7 elements to it. Like what the fuck I'm supposed to know what. Flat fives and augmented ninths and shit, and if you think you're learning the music on the sheet and you're gonna apply the theory, if you know your theory, you can look at that and go, oh yeah, I get it. It's like this, and but if you don't know any of this stuff, but really the musician who's playing it in the room, who created it, was probably just like sliding his hands on his guitar a little bit and digging the
yeah. It's funny. It's funny to think about things like that. Like the best things I feel like I've ever like put on a record are just like unintentional things. Like I mean, there's a couple of songs I did recently where I was just wearing like this like silver ring on my pinky. I took it off because I was working on I was doing an oil change and fucking had a stubborn bolt, and I fucking bent the ring and fucking cut up my finger. But I was wearing this ring while I was tracking a couple of these songs, and like there's this like little squeal that happens every once in a while. And like sometimes it happens at the exact right moment for it to give the moment just like a little bit more of that punk attitude. Because I mean, the idea is like punk, house, hip hop all melded together. And so it's the anger and the sloppiness and the personality is a little bit of the point. And like it also kind of like just made a little bit more of like because if it's magnetized in some sort of way, which it was, because like it's obviously kind of like pulling to the humbug, the pickups a little bit. It's just making this squeal, and sometimes it just happens at exactly the right moment for me to be like, you know what I mean? Like, I like it.
Yeah, hell yeah, yeah.
It's those things you don't plan for. It's those,
sure.
I remember plenty of shows that I've played as a drummer where like I have these fucking like transcendental fucking flow state moments where like I'm just in it, and me and the band are fucking locked in, and it's just like fucking, you know what I mean? Electric.
Yeah.
And I mean, just at the end of the day, it doesn't matter about as much of like the language or anything. It just is not as much if you know enough to be able to teach it to yourself and be like, this is what a C chord looks like. See, you got the cage system and fucking.
Yeah.
I mean, it gets more
3 or 4 chords and pentatonic scales.
It goes a long way.
It goes a long way.
It goes a really long way, especially with the average person being a casual listener, like we talked about. It is what it is. And really at the end of the day, if you love this enough to make a career out of it, no matter what that takes, then then at that point it just comes down to doing the work in a way that's most comfortable for you. I've met people that are completely musically intellectual, that like literally their whole process is like building a song around a singer, which I would turn people away from that when I was trying to produce other artists. I would literally be like, oh, like, I mean, fucking do you have like you have something forth for us to do here? And I mean, it's a different skill to like, pick out a key that somebody is in and then build the song around them. And I mean, they would be like writing it out and everything like that, like noting every single aspect of that. And I'm like, I mean, that's a different way of doing things. That is probably a good way to, utilize kind of the academia to get a gig, you know what I mean? Producing a song for somebody, for a flat fee, if that's what you want to do. I personally, if I put that level of work into a piece, I want to at least be able to like make it some sort of agreement where we like split the publishing, because if I believe in the song, what I would be fucking retarded to just sorry, shouldn't say that word, but I would be fucking stupid to just I mean, imagine making $1 million song, or the song that goes on to make millions of dollars, and you only charged $300 to make it. Like, then you're just hit. You sold the rights to it. You know what I mean? That's like, if you really believe in something and you think that it's a sufficient amount of work that you should be getting paid properly for. Like, I mean, that's why splits are there in the first place, to ensure that, you know, everybody gets their fair share over time. But I mean, as you know, we mentioned before, the music industry can be quite skeezy. You know, I mean, that's it's a reflection of life itself, and would probably imagine what you're pursuing now is probably a little bit more conducive to you know, where you're at in life as, you know, a father and a husband. You know,
Yeah, sure.
and like, I mean, I mean, am I wrong? Are you doing a little bit better? Like, I is the world a little bit more kind of formal, and kind of like, yes, you have this
Oh yeah.
expectation to play these songs, but at least you don't have to worry about, you know, people treating you differently because you didn't do coke in the bathroom with them. Like,
Yeah, I know. Never have to do with something things like that. No, that's
yeah,
definitely. Once I sort of, once recognized that like solo guitar was like an opportunity for me, that was a possibility. It's definitely like that was a big. Um, was not something that was not part of the grand plan. Certainly, a year prior to it
yeah,
beginning. But pretty soon, I started because I knew that I knew that because of my experiences before that I knew I had the drive. And at that particular point in time, when I was just starting to study, it was also like I was in a lot of debt.
right,
And I was kind of relatively new in Chicago, and the people that I did know were very busy people, so I didn't
right,
have like
yeah,
a really big social life. So I was kind of like, I had a job, and time,
yeah,
and so that's why, and a vision that there was, you could I could pull this off maybe.
yeah,
And if I just stick to it and just keep throwing myself out there, and be a good person to work with, and definitely that's a part of it.
right,
But yeah, no, I've always been somebody who has enjoyed my, I'm a house cat, I enjoy my sort of bourgeois, middle class
yeah,
life, and I'm not somebody that, I admire, if I didn't, uh, you know, I could have been more. There's certainly people who are certainly could be more hardcore, and maybe,
yeah,
and that's why it's been a slower. It's been, like the whole, like even with COVID happening and seeming and having, had my daughter was born in 2017, and I was like, so it was kind of, if it worked for the family that, sort of like our family goes. Fortunately, like my wife, and has a good professional job that so I don't, there's the burden on me to, so is my music income in our life was a bit of a secondary thing. And we
mhm,
weren't, it was a bonus, and
yeah,
especially then we have a kid, and then it becomes like, oh, I'm in position to do the daycare and raise the child, which is, especially as a 50-year-old, where I was, it was an incredible opportunity. I never thought that
yeah,
was going to happen to me, and I could
yeah,
put a whole soul into it. And I knew that like I couldn't, I had to like phase out like marketing, like doing all the hustles that I used to do to get gigs, all
right,
the free stuff. And I stopped marketing myself to weddings, and stopped, and just whatever would still come in would come in. I still had enough other stuff to keep me kind of busy. And then COVID happens and everything wipes out. And I didn't think to myself, there was a moment where my next gig is 18 months from now. And it's like,
wow,
am I going to be able to know how to play guitar in 18 months? I don't know.
yeah,
I've just been hired though.
yeah,
And I would do stuff. I would have to like do all sorts of stuff to kind of keep me playing. But what came back was I got hired to play at the Palmer House Hotel, and
yeah,
in 2022, and that was like 3 hours, and I had to get myself back up in shape,
yeah,
and then it put it in my mind that, oh my god, like maybe I have a future of this still,
yeah,
and what I do is interesting, and I need to like, and there was a couple of years, it's, getting back up to like making sure I can do 3 hours,
yeah,
and then decide, and then realizing that, what I need to do is, and that's one thing. And then, okay, what if I just was going to do one set and do a 40? I mean, what's my best 45 minutes? And then just start
yeah,
thinking about those, and then taking individual pieces, and like I'm going to finally, because when you're playing that much music, it's hard to have any one piece of music be
right,
perfect, and
Right.
take like what are the most challenging physical, the most exciting, the most fireworks, the showstoppers, how do
Yeah.
I have to like pick a small set of these and bear down on that stuff. And I'm not going to worry about learning music for weddings anymore. And that's kind of, and so I started like, that was like a year or two ago where my mentality kind of went towards that. And I'm sort of, and then became like, now I'm preparing I'm going to record an album, so like a guitar and drums album where I'm going to
Uh-huh.
like play these pieces of music that were sort of like conceived as solo guitar pieces and
Right.
heretofore been performed usually by like dull classical guitarists sitting down. And I want to like have like real live intense drums and play these pieces like that to really showcase the energy and have
Yeah.
hopefully be kind of unique and I can see that there'd be, and who knows what and I want to be recorded in a nice studio. So I'm sort of like physically to even get to that I had to like sort of like choose the pieces and then making sure that practicing them with drum machines. I shared with you a couple links of what I'm sort of like I have to prepare them because the torque that I need to play them with drummers. And so I'm at the point now where I can start to really just sort of prepare the studio for that. And then
Yeah.
and I'm always looking for new opportunities to so definitely like things are going, but it's nice in terms of now that I can kind of do it and not worry too much about the survival aspect of it. Take a long view and look at these I got this type of project is still just going to take a year to do probably. And
Yeah.
and I've just met like a new singer that I'm really hoping will be something. So I'm excited. I'm excited to enter a new phase where I'm collaborating more and I'm doing stuff with other musicians. It's not just about solo guitar too,
Right. Yeah.
and breaking it. That's a really hard thing because your arrangements and the solo guitar arrangements become like your security blanket. It's hard to
Yeah.
get so embedded in your muscle memory, and it's a terrifying thought to break out of them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
learn them as song, understand them as songs sometimes, because I
Yeah.
learn these pieces like things that are usually sung, but I've learned them as guitar pieces, and then
Yeah.
to sort of like work with a singer and then like relearn the songs is
Yeah.
a mind-blowing process. So there's always things to so it never ends, man. It's
Yeah.
like there's always, if you think that I've been blessed with having some sort of either a natural curiosity or something like that that's made me just just hungry to keep I can't there's still like I would look down ahead and look in the future, still think here's music, man, I would love to be able to play like that or play music that sounds like this. And and then to find myself slowly finding the paths to like, oh my gosh, this is how you do it. It's so hard. Is being I've dedicated my life to sort of like learning music I didn't grow up playing, and you have to have like you have to learn how to learn,
Yeah.
and one of the hardest things to learn is that it's almost impossible to like reverse engineer things from records. You got to like meet people that
Yeah.
know the inside of it and talk to
Yeah.
and learn it from the inside, and then you'll do it the right way.
Yeah.
And but you got to start somewhere. And if I was telling a young person just don't be scared, like I threw my I didn't even realize how ignorant I was, until I've been doing it for 10 years,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and
and
that's
you can't
that's
let
a big
things
part of
stop you.
growth.
If you got the drive, you got the desire to play music, and you're thinking and what you're doing sounds good, then that's all that matters. And you just got
Yeah.
to keep going forward, and hopefully. And when you hit, and that's the thing, when you hit these, you might have a project and it's going great, maybe with just some friends, and then you hit that point where people's lives change and the friends move on, and then you're like, well, what am I going to do now? Do I do in a
Yeah.
new band or? And that's the moment where you say you retreat and you figure out, should I learn? Maybe I learn something, maybe I start taking
Yeah.
lessons, start doing some go back out. I always tell people, I mean, exploring the roots music of the Americas is like, there's endless things to learn about that.
Yeah.
And the histories and the story. Then you start getting into actually understanding, the real history of it all. And
Yeah.
it's amazing. So.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree wholeheartedly. I actually have to get ready to
Right on,
go
man. This has
to
been great.
St. Louis, but
Good
I
timing.
would love to have you on again. I basically I usually only try to do like an hour the first time with guests, but I mean we just went off the deep end, so I'm cool with it. I will go ahead and let you know when this episode should be available at the end of June
Okay.
or the mid-June. I
Okay.
want to say like the middle of June.
All right.
So what do you have going on there? Where can where can people find you in the near future?
There's nothing, because maybe I'll have some news for you by then, by the time it gets posted. But at the moment, I can't.
Sure.
Everything's private, or everything's more or less I don't have a good public performance to hype at the moment for
Okay.
the summertime, but something should be coming in, or else I have to start.
Okay. So it's mainly like private gigs. Well,
you go to my website and there's always my calendar there, and then
Yeah.
send me on the socials, and you'll be kept abreast, because it happens. It just sometimes it's usually
Yeah.
like 6 weeks or so I get in advance or something. So
I hear you. But yeah, if people want to book you for their own private events, where
yeah,
can they?
or if
What
I offer less if people are curious about learning some stuff. You can see some of my videos, and if you're curious about learning, even if it's just like one, sometimes the best thing to do is, if you're curious a little bit, we just do one lesson. I can teach you some strums or something like that, some rhythmic ideas,
Yeah.
and set you on your way, or have it. But yeah, or if you're a drummer, especially I'm looking for drummers. If you want to jam, it's jam.
For sure. All right, Neil Dixon Smith, everybody. All right, thanks for being on.
All right, take care.
You as well.